My introductions, if long, would interfere with our program and your questions. Robert Dunn is president of Business for Social Responsibility on a national level. His organization was founded in 1992 by 50 companies. Currently, they have a membership of nearly 1,000 companies, just in less than 3 years. They range in size from small to very big operations. The overall budget that Robert oversees is $1.5 million annually. Robert Dunn was previously the senior vice president of Levi Strauss, and that's really where the origins of this Business for Responsibility program originated in many ways. Prior to that, he held a number of important positions, including a member of the Carter administration. His presentation will be followed by comments of about 5 minutes on the part of Debi Coleman, Stan Amy, and Ron Paul, whose companies are members and representative of the objectives of Business for Social Responsibility. Debi Coleman is Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Merix Corporation, formerly the Circuit Board Division of Tektronix. Her company has shown phenomenal growth since the initial public offering of its stock in May of 1994. They're heading for revenues of over $100 million this year. Debi is personally involved in many community endeavors. Stan Amy, General Manager of Nature's. He started with one Portland store in 1977, doing about $300,000 in annual revenues, growing to 6 stores currently, doing $40 million in revenues. Growth seems to be a real pattern up here at the head table. Besides serving on Portland Planning and Housing Commissions, Stan has a special philosophy about the relationships and interactions between his stores and the neighborhoods they serve. And I'm sure we'll be hearing a little about that in the course of this meeting. Ron Paul founded the Ron Paul Catering and Charcuterie, is that right, Charcuterie? Company in 1983. He and his company have received many awards and recognition in the local and national press. He is an active participant in community work, and by that I mean good work. So let's get on with the program. Robert Dunn, you're the kickoff and feature, and we move from there.
Thank you very much, Don, for your kind introduction of all of us. And it is a privilege for me to be in a city I love and visit often, and to be here as part of a presentation that includes 3 such distinguished local business leaders. All of us want to talk with you a bit today about what a growing number of companies are doing to have a more positive impact on the quality of life we all enjoy. At a time in our history when the power and influence of business is expanding, most Americans hold the business community and business leaders in low esteem. I think this is because many companies still operate using the philosophy made popular by 19th century bank robbers, who basically thought the way to approach their business was to get in, get the money, and get out. Happily, there is increasing evidence to suggest that in the long term, this view doesn't make dollars or cents. Some people want all of us to believe that you have to choose between doing good and doing well in business. But the truth is that this is a false dichotomy. In the long term, a commitment to ethical values pays real dividends that go right to the bottom line. I don't want to suggest, however, that trying to do what's right is always easy, or that there isn't a price to pay, at least in the short term. My 84 now year old mother likes ice cream, and she particularly likes Ben & Jerry's butter pecan. I don't know whether any of you are fans of that flavor as well. And one day I mentioned to her that Ben Cohn, one of the founders of Ben & Jerry's, was a member of the BSR board of directors. She said, "That's great. Tell him to put more pecans in his ice cream." Well, I have to admit that I had some reluctance to raise this subject with a member of my board. But I did speak with him at the next meeting. I passed along my mother's recommendation, and he reached into his pocket, took out a gift certificate for a free pint, and scribbled a note which read, "Dear Mrs. Dunn, we already put lots of nuts in our ice cream, but just for you, we'll add a few more special. Love, Ben." My mother was thrilled and is a very happy consumer. But in today's business environment, many consumers are making demands that are far more difficult. They want to know where the nuts are grown, whether they're harvested in an environmentally friendly way, and what the wages and living conditions are like for the farm workers who pick them. Doing business has never been easy, but managing in today's economy introduces complexities almost unimaginable just a few short years ago. Multinational corporations, mom and pop stores, professional service organizations all need to wrestle with issues such as how to create a family-friendly workplace, or what to do about the privacy of computer communications, or how to avoid purchasing goods that are linked to forced prison or child labor. As Don mentioned just a few years ago, a small group of business leaders, including Portland's own Jim Kelly, formed a new business organization, BSR, to help companies understand and address these kinds of issues. They knew that many people in business want to earn a profit and contribute to a more just and sustainable economy. But often, those people need help, sometimes just to learn about a new way of doing business, sometimes just to benefit from the experiences and learnings of other like-minded executives and managers. As Don has said, we've grown rapidly in the last few years, and our organization now includes some of the most respected names in American commerce. These companies have all come together to explore how they can be both more successful and more responsible. And BSR tries to help them by understanding the issues and challenges of responsible business behavior, providing information about corporate best practices, bringing businesses together in informal networks, providing technical assistance and consulting services, and conducting workshops on a broad range of topics, such as eco-efficiency and green design, affirmative action, human rights, global manufacturing, community economic development, personnel policies, philanthropy. The list goes on and on. As an organization, it's very important for me to tell you that we try to be as helpful as we can, but we are not prescriptive. The story is told by the presidents of one of our member companies, Time Warner, of the schoolboy who was asked to write everything he knew about Socrates on an exam. And he said, Socrates was a Greek. He lived many years ago. He was wise. He told people what to do. He was poisoned. I've promised my mother that we will not do anything at BSR that leads to my premature demise. Being a responsible business in today's economic environment is a struggle and difficult. It's a destination and it's a journey. It's a process. It may be helpful to introduce a few caveats as we talk about this subject. First, I think all of us need to understand that there are no perfect companies in the world, and very few that are altogether evil. What distinguishes the best is the seriousness of their efforts to adopt and implement ethical values and socially responsible principles. Second, acting ethically is not a guarantee of profitability. Good values will not overcome the problems of undercapitalization or an uncompetitive cost structure or inferior products or shabby customer service. And third, being socially responsible is not about political correctness or public relations or marketing campaigns. It's about what you do and not what you say you do. Let me share just a couple of examples which I hope will illustrate how companies have been successful in proceeding on their journey towards more responsible practices. First, I'd like to tell you a little about a small Washington business called Burrito Brothers. It's similar, I guess, to Machismo Mouse here in Oregon. It was started just a few years ago by a couple of young people just out of college. And here's how they've designed a Mexican fast food operation in a highly competitive, cost-sensitive sector of the economy. They made a commitment up front to the diversity of their workforce, the development and support of their employees. And so its store managers include men and women and people of color. One was originally hired as a dishwasher. They are almost unique in their niche of the market by paying health care benefits for all of their employees. Burrito Brothers has built its stores of sustainable materials, uses environmentally friendly products, and spearheaded a neighborhood curbside recycling program in Georgetown and the District of Columbia. Burrito Brothers has reduced the fat content of its menu, a problem with Mexican food, to less than 15%. Its goal is 0, and it provides nutritional information to all of its customers through the Burrito Brothers News, which is available exclusively in its own restaurants. And Burrito Brothers has a program to donate all of its unused food to local food banks and gives 7.5% of its pre-tax profits to community organizations. Now, are these young, wild-eyed idealists who are destined to find their way to the trash heap of failed businesses? It appears unlikely. In the next year, Burrito Brothers will be doubling the number of their retail stores from 6 to 12. Now, lest you think that social responsibility is only the province of small businesses, I want to tell you that there are many large companies that are taking laudable initiatives as well. Companies, all BSR members, like Timberland, Patagonia, and Levi Strauss & Company, who are improving working conditions in the factories of the developing world. Companies like AT&T, Polaroid, and Church & Dwight, who are modeling new processes of green building design. Companies like Hasbro Toys, setting standards for consumer product safety. Liz Claiborne, tackling domestic violence. Federal Express, modeling innovative community service in its partnership with the American Red Cross. And Home Depot, working to enhance its support of businesses owned by women and people of color. And it's BSR companies right here in Oregon, like Rejuvenation Inc. and Griggs Anderson Research, Protem, the Campbell Group, Hannah Anderson, Sokol Blosser Winery, and Neil Kelly Designers, all of whom were identified in Oregon's 100 Best Companies to Work For, based on pay, benefits, employee and community involvement, training, and workplace culture. In a few moments, you'll hear from three other companies who made that distinguished list as well. It's these companies and others like them across the United States, I think, that ultimately will transform how business is conducted in this country. Those of you interested in learning more about BSR and having more of an opportunity to interact informally with these companies and others should consider attending our annual conference, which occurs in San Francisco at the beginning of November, and there will be materials in the back of the room about the conference. There's a story that's told about a person who led a virtuous life and who, as a result, was invited to have the chance to examine both heaven and hell before she died. And she was accompanied by an angel. She was asked which she first wanted to see, and she thought that she would first take a look at hell. She was escorted down a hallway, and there were large double doors. They opened, and she observed people seated around a sumptuous banquet table with wonderful food from every corner of the globe. But she noticed that everyone in the room was sad. Some people were crying. And as she watched more carefully, she realized that before each of them was a very large fork, and that it was impossible for each of them to reach the food with their forks and to feed themselves. Discouraged, she said she was eager to see what heaven was like, and she was taken to the other end of the hall through a similar set of doors. As they swung open, at first she was somewhat puzzled because the scene was quite similar. A lot of people sitting around a similar banquet table laden with wonderful and delectable food, probably from the establishments represented on this panel. And but in this instance, everyone was smiling and laughing and happy. And as she looked more closely, she saw that each person had the same utensil, but they were reaching to the center of the table, spearing food, and feeding their neighbors, helping one another. And it seems to me that's really the fundamental challenge for all of us in every aspect of our life, and particularly as we engage in commerce. The extent to which we have opportunities every day to help determine whether the society we enjoy and the legacy we present for our children and future generations is more like a heaven than a hell. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bob. A little more than a year ago, as a newly minted CEO, I found myself determined more and more to not make the same mistakes that I've endured in my past corporate life. And I began to search out other like-minded business executives, organizations, read a lot of articles and books, and searched a bit for examples of best practices of truly values-driven management and principle-centered leadership. And kind of on this journey of discovery, along the way I found out that in fact the phrase business ethics was not an oxymoron. In addition to BSR, I discovered, interestingly enough, that an organization called the Chemical Manufacturers Association had a very innovative program called the Responsible Care Initiative. And this really mattered to me because Merix Corporation manufactures printed circuit board products, and we have a great deal of chemicals in our manufacturing process. So in my research, I found that at the heart of the Responsible Care Initiative are 10 guiding principles implemented through 6 codes of management practices which cover all activities of the chemical industry. They spell out new and aggressive ways of managing pollution prevention, process safety, distribution practices, employee health and safety, product stewardship, and community awareness and emergency response measures to safeguard citizens in the unlikely event of chemical mishaps. There are real teeth in these codes. Failure to comply can lead to expulsion. And to enhance compliance, the CMA is now crafting a third-party verification system in concrete performance measures. After learning about this organization, we were able to review Merix's chemical product suppliers and ensure that each one of our suppliers were in fact members of CMA and part of the Responsible Care Initiative. Additionally, I learned about CERES, or the Coalition for Environmentally Responsible Economics, whose members include such large corporations as General Motors and the Polaroid Corporation. They also are in the process of setting up third-party verification of their members' practices and adherence to their codes of conduct as well. I found that there was a fair number of books on the scene about socially responsible management and leadership practices. In fact, they seem to pop up in every bookstore that I visited. A recent one was written by a James O'Toole titled Leading Change. And this book particularly focuses on how managers can lead change and or overcome resistance to change by focusing on moral values of integrity, trust, and an unwavering commitment to doing what's best for employees. Bowman and Deal published Leading with Soul. Ross and Kay, Toppling the Pyramids, Redefining the Way Companies Are Run. Many of you are familiar with Stephen Covey's work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Individuals, but I preferred his book entitled Principle-Centered Leadership. Pennington also wrote, On My Honor, I Will, Leading with Integrity in Changing Times. And most recently, I got a chance to read Murphy's Forging the Heroic Organization. So there's lots of books out there that are beginning to pay attention, I feel, to this very important trend in management practices. I also came across the Washington, D.C.-based Ethics Resource Center last year, which published the results of a national survey that showed that a growing percentage of companies now have formal ethics programs in place. 60% of the companies surveyed had published codes of ethics. 33% have training in place on business conduct and ethics, and 33% have ethics offices where employees can receive advice or report questionable business activities. There's also the Center for Business Ethics at Bentley College in Waltham, Massachusetts, and a similar center at Santa Clara University down in Northern California. I began to feel that corporate social responsibility and business ethics programs were highly compatible with management by objectives, total quality management, and other highly successful and visible management approaches. Common sense, it seemed to me, and also taking a look at many of the well-known and well-regarded firms, suggested a strong connection between shared values and corporate performance, although there's yet to be detailed and database studies of that. It's getting tougher and tougher to address a lot of complex issues in today's business world. We've got to continue to drive for solid and bottom line results, so to speak. But I think that values-driven management approaches and principle-centered leadership can offer some hope and some best approaches to many of the problems that we face in industry today. Issues like employee empowerment and productivity, workforce health and safety, supplier relations in addition to customer satisfaction, waste reduction, employee motivation and morale, employee benefits and incentive programs, workforce diversity, environmental concerns, accurate financial reporting to shareholders, community involvement, and all sorts of diverse issues that companies face today. I think that all these areas and many more can benefit from the application of core shared values and operating principles. As a new company, Merix attempted last summer to try to put into words what our vision of the future was and what our corporate values and operating principles were. And basically, we feel that we are accountable to all our stakeholders. First and foremost, our customers, but also our shareholders, our investors, our employees, our supplier partners, the geographic community we live in, which is Western Washington County, and also the business community that we operate in, which geographically is somewhat the greater metro Portland area, but also the electronics industry and the manufacturing section of that throughout the United States. So we've crafted a number of corporate values, and I'll just give you a shorthand list. The first is that customers are our principal focus. The second is that people are our most valuable asset. The third is that our business plans support our missions and goals. The fourth is that effective communication is critical to our success. The fifth is that we hope to be a corporate good neighbor. And the last is to demonstrate a strong sense of ethics in all our business dealings. We also have a set of business principles that are central to how we hope to manage ourselves, utilize the resources we have, and interact with all the members of Merix's community, all those stakeholder groups I outlined. But I think what's more important than crafting these value statements and having them understood and communicated to all the stakeholder groups is that we really have to walk the talk. And we face that challenge every day. As Bob mentioned, there's no company out there today that I feel is totally evil or totally perfectly good. The challenges come up on a day-to-day basis. But I think that when you communicate shared values and you make decisions and your actions do in fact belie your words, that they really do help you face the formidable challenges of business in the 90s. Thank you.
You never know where your challenges for responsibility are going to come from. Right now, mine's trying to be a responsible speaker when I plan for 10 minutes, and I'm trying to fit it in 5, so I'll try to go fast. I hope your ears are quick. Thinking about this topic was an opportunity for some reflection, particularly about why I feel business responsibility is so important today, somehow more important now than it ever has been in our history. And I ended up being reminded of Peter Drucker's admonishment in his book, The Effective Executive, that we all must focus on contribution. And I think there is a unique contribution to the development of a responsible society that businesses can make that is unique to them, apart from the institutions we normally look for social responsibility. That goes beyond checking the box or compliance with standards of expectations for socially responsible operations or socially responsible citizenship. And what is unique in my mind, that a business can do is create a marketplace for social responsibility. And what's so important about a marketplace right now is that a marketplace is an engine for innovation and for experimentation. And we all know that the rate of change and complexity of the society that we live in is accelerating tremendously. We can feel it in the pit of our stomachs. I believe that increase in the rate of change and that level of complexity that we face in society creates a critical need for innovation and for experimentation in the social responsibility. The institutions we traditionally look to as the guardians of social responsibility, our governments and churches, are primarily designed to create and provide stability. Think about what our expectations are of them. We expect equal treatment. We expect broad-based acceptance of changes before they're implemented. Those expectations create tremendous barriers to innovation. One size fits all is another way of saying equal treatment. That's not an innovative, encouraging environment. That's not to say that innovation doesn't occur in the governmental sector. It does. Earl is a good example of somebody who's been swimming up that stream for quite a while. But it is not an environment that I think we can rely on as being the primary engine of innovation. And if I'm right, that the rate of change in society demands that we have innovation in social responsibility, that makes the role of businesses absolutely critical. As retailers, we get to see a lot of that because we're in the midst of the free market. And the free market really is where that happens. You know, in the theory of a free market, you have a multiplicity of consumers who are empowered with the economic ability to make their demands felt and hopefully the information to make discerning choices. And you have a multiplicity of producers who will respond to those demands. And so you get change. New demands arise, new producers arise. Old producers become obsolete and go out of business. New producers jump the gun and produce something that really isn't demanded and go out of business. It's a messy process, but it does drive change and innovation. We've been able to see a lot of that in the retail role, brokering, particularly for our customer base, which is a subset of the population who are particularly concerned about issues of social responsibility. One of the key elements for us is what we call an urban-rural partnership, where we're trying to create urban partners and consumers for rural producers who are willing to keep their cattle out of the riparian areas, who are willing to take less environmentally degrading approaches to oyster farming in Willapa Bay. And those exercises that they're willing to go through are significantly more expensive in terms of the cost of production. If they are forced to be commodity producers and have those efforts on their part unrecognized in the marketplace, then they won't do them, except if they do them, or until they go out of business, and they certainly won't replicate. If you can create a differentiated product, if you can differentiate them in the marketplace for the consumer, then you can encourage replication, which is the second real advantage that business can bring by creating a market for social responsibility. First was innovation, second is replication. It's a competitive environment. Believe me, if my competitor is doing something right, I'm going to copy him. And so is the next guy. And that can apply to social responsibility just as well as it can apply to profitability. At the urging of Gretchen Kafori, we piloted a program for bottles and cans for the homeless about a year ago. We started off with 5 stores, and we were the only company willing to take it on initially. Next month, that program will go to 130 locations in the Portland metropolitan area. That's competition. It's competition of a different type, but it has the effect of replicating or spreading a new idea. The potential is to create a partnership web between consumer and social activists who are in a position to identify needs, businesses who are in a position to innovate and experiment, and governments who are in a position to institutionalize those. Once a good solution has been found, then we do want broad-based distribution of that solution. We do want to build a floor under it and ensure that it's maintained. So there's a very vital role for those institutions of stability to play. They institutionalize solutions, whether through regulation or broad-based service. But it needs to be an interactive process. We've seen it happen in our business in sustainable agriculture, which went from backyard organic gardens to a real industry, and then to governmental regulation and support, defining organically grown legally, providing research funds for the LISA program, low input sustainable agriculture, bringing commercial. You now have Gallo Wine as the single biggest organic producer in this nation. They don't advertise it, but through the LISA program, they discovered there are actually cost savings in that process. We've seen the same thing occur in recycling as that movement occurs. Well, fundamentally, what you're talking about by applying those principles is leverage. If you can create that web. So we have businesses bringing some old-fashioned business principles to social responsibility. The old-fashioned business principles of focusing on contribution and focusing on leverage. If we can do that as businesses, then we're doing more than merely checking the box. The challenge is, will we actually go beyond compliance and focus on contribution? And to do that, businesses can do a few things, and consumers can do some other things. And I think really what the consumers can do is more important, or what we all can do as consumers, because we're all both. Businesses can empower consumers by actually taking the risk to create some real choices so they have the opportunity to vote with their dollars. That means listening to your critics and responding to social activists. Secondly, they can provide information so that remember, the empowered consumer not only has to have dollars, they've got to have information to make discerning choices. And that information has to be usable. I'm real excited about what we're doing at our new store that we're opening in Vancouver in a couple of weeks. We are piloting for us our first information-intensive retail environment. We're doing it a lot of different ways. The part that I'm most excited about is that we're providing a computer-based access to product attributes. We're beginning with 7 product attributes. We'll go to 19 in the near future. The attributes speak to health issues like low-fat, dairy-free. They speak to environmental issues like recycled content, organic, etc. On the shelf tag, where normally all you see is the price, you've got a series of 7 characteristics on that tag that you can walk through the store, immediately spotting products that qualify. That's all in our computer price file. Going to our help desk, you can tell the clerk there what customized list you're interested in. I want to see all the dairy-free products, and they can print out a list for you. Where we'd like to take that in the next phase is direct access. You pick up the product, you walk to the scanner, you scan it past it, and the information comes up on the screen. And not only the information about those attributes, but access to secondary information such as that produced by people like Shopping for a Better World. So it gets into the issue of the corporate responsibility of the producers of those products. The second thing information. The second thing businesses can do is create credibility. Avoid hype, avoid posturing, particularly as perfect. I think that's a critical issue. Be honest and disclose your information. Third, and I think in many ways one of the most important, is businesses can make social responsibility profitable. If you don't prove it's profitable, it won't be replicated. What the consumer can do is, number one, don't underestimate the power of expectations. That's how we changed the reality in the Pacific Northwest about things like litter. It didn't happen because of government regulation. It didn't happen because of business initiative. It changed because all of our expectations changed, and the environment changed to follow that. I think it's time in this society that we say the exchange and the social contract between us as a society and these artificial entities called corporations is that we expect them all to have a clearly defined social purpose beyond making a profit. Secondly, don't expect perfection. Looking for perfection leads a focus on avoiding failure, not on succeeding. It becomes a focus on avoiding controversy, complying, as opposed to a focus on making a contribution. I'd like to see businesses have the same environment that we try to create for our employees. Focus on contribution, accept the fact you'll make mistakes, acknowledge your mistakes, and learn from them. And that's up to all of us as citizens to create that environment for businesses, to make it safe to try to innovate in the area of social responsibility. Finally, consumers can recognize the power of our purchases. Little choices, individual choices, drive the marketplace. I think we've come to a point in society when we're talking about affecting change, we are more powerful as citizens. We're more powerful as consumers than we are as citizens. And the issue is, will we recognize that and start exercising that power?
Thank you. It's nice to be invited out for lunch. I feel a little awkward not helping bust the table. As I was contemplating opening a kitchen in 1983, I had a neurotic fantasy that I should be able to apply to the National Endowment for the Arts for a grant. After all, I was a food artist. My medium just happened to be different than my musician friends or my sculptor friends or my music appreciation friends, as Dunn, the City Club's new member, can easily attest. In today's political climate, had I thought those thoughts, I think I would have been certifiably insane, but this is going back over a decade. But I did feel that I had a point. I consider the preparation of food to be an art, one that is practiced around the world and only comparatively now is being appreciated in this country. As you might have surmised, I was in for a rude wake-up call. Instead of a modest stipend and an allowance for ingredients from the NEA, I opened the doors as a business and I was suddenly thrust into the world of commerce. It's as if our mission statement at Ron Paul reads, "It's the food, stupid." This translates into building the kitchen first and then designing the restaurant space around it. It means that we have an ever-changing menu to exercise the creativity of our kitchen. and that we continue a tradition of extemporaneous cooking that combines a balance of recipes used for some dishes and impromptu creations by our chefs of the others. But just as we seldom cook with recipes, we also don't operate our business according to the traditional prescriptions of short-term profit. We look towards sustaining ourselves in a world where business success is extremely difficult to measure. And I'd like to talk about business for social responsibility as it applies to us, and try to create two different directions with which to view it. The first is how we view ourselves internally, what I would call corporate introspection. And the rest is to look at how the company interacts with the world around it, both our immediate neighborhood, as Stan has mentioned, as well as in concentric circles, going out as far away as national and international sources for ingredients. And I think it's helpful if you sort of look at business for social responsibility in those two dimensions, because all of us who are involved in developing companies at some point have to pay attention first and foremost to, as Debbie said, walking our talk. What we do internally within the company is going to be the mirror by which we can go forward into the community with the same values. And I actually think that rather than my being up here discussing those, it would be helpful for you to have had a chance to talk to both current and former employees of any of our companies as a truer measure, perhaps, of the walk the talk philosophy. But I can explain from our leadership positions what we endeavor to do. And we always know that, as Bob said, it's a quest and a journey towards improving the workplace. What we're striving for is an egalitarian culture where profits can be achieved without standing on the backs of our colleagues. And that is the fundamental way that I look at running our business. The notion of the bank robbers and short-term profits have been traditionally exercised at someone's expense, and we try to avoid that level of expenditure. One way of doing it is by developing egalitarian benefits that transcend organizational levels within the company. An example is the amount of vacation time that each employee accrues is identical, whether it's a senior manager or a dishwasher or a bus person. Their rate of pay may be different. We can talk about those ratios in just a minute. But it's important to us fundamentally to recognize that everyone deserves paid time off. And why should a senior manager accrue twice, thrice, or even more time off than someone who's working just as diligently but happens to be at a different entry point within the company? Another way we look internally is to the benefits that we provide, and similarly they are egalitarian. We provide 70% of the health care premium for all of our employees' immediate constellation, whether that's a single, a couple, or a family. Again, it doesn't matter whether that's at the highest level or at the lowest level of the organization. So those are just two ways that we've begun to look inside the company and try to define our practices in a way that we can hold our heads high and then take the next step in interacting with the rest of the community. Those issues will revolve around vendor relations, corporate philosophy and corporate philanthropy, the ratio of diversity in the workplace, all those issues that I'm sure you're familiar with, we address, but we need to address them out of a position of fundamental strength within the company first. And we won't shy away from recognizing that we are not perfect, and our former employees, as well as some current employees, I'm sure could vouch for that, but that we are trying. And that we're not trying to save the world, though. We're trying to work one step at a time within our own company to illuminate a path that is not yet frequently followed. Thanks.
I'm Mona Ozaki, the board host this afternoon. And my question is, given the values that you stated, what are some of the practices and self-monitoring procedures that you use to ensure that your everyday practices are consistent with the values that you've set out for your organizations? Anyone can respond to that.
We have some internal processes and some external ones. We're a member of CIRCES, which you indicated earlier, which is provides the ability to do an environmental audit of your internal practices. They actually monitor the audit and help you evaluate your practices. Internally, we have an explicitly stated social purpose mission statement, and we have a series of defined processes for individual staff members to identify occasions when we are not following our mission, because it's a guidepost and we know clearly that we're going to pull away and pull back, and so it's an ongoing correction process, and we try to have a very open process and discussion of that.
Could I just say that sometimes business has a lot to learn from other sectors. Some years ago, Ed Koch was the mayor of New York, and he walked around the city, and wherever he traveled, he asked the same question: how am I doing? And I think that's the simple measure that's available to everyone, even in the smallest of companies, to think about all of those who are impacted by your decisions and to open a dialogue where people are see themselves as having permission to get honest and direct feedback, whether it's your investors or your customers or your employees or your neighbors in the community. And then it can get more complex. There are some larger companies that actually pay external auditors who do a comprehensive examination of how they're doing and who publish those audits as part of their annual report.
Debbie or Ron, anything to add?
I'd add that one of the operating principles I was referring to is accountability. As a corporation, we measure and report our performance, and we're accountable to all stakeholders, shareholders, employees, the community, etc., and the corporation for producing the results that we committed. We recently completed our first annual report as an independent public company, and instead of bragging about our strategies for the future and all the wonderful growth and goals we were going to reach, we thought that we ought to report very, very honestly on all aspects of our operation. And so the way I deal with the issue of walking the talk is to really be obsessed with measuring and reporting to all aspects of the business. I frequently say that the role of the CEO is blank relations: community relations, public relations, investor relations, employee relations, customer relations. And I spend a great deal of my time, in fact, I have a chart I check every month to make sure that I'm spending time, productive time, I hope, with all of our constituencies and getting the feedback and the input from them as to how we're doing.
And now we turn to members, including brand new ones. But Diana, you're not a brand new one. Go ahead.
Diana Smiley, City Club member. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for the good program. My question is to any one of you who would like to answer it, and it's on behalf of all of the nonprofits represented in the audience, and that is about your philanthropic practices and how you arrive at some sort of either a program or a practice for giving financially and volunteer-wise to the community.
Why don't we start right down with you, Ron?
Thank you. The short answer for that for us is that we view corporate philanthropy as a substitute for major advertising. And that if you think of an advertising thrust in a retail segment is to position yourself in the customer's mind to think of you. We could think of no better way of translating what our message is than through small but many contributions to the organizations that we can possibly underwrite. Our dollar amount varies year to year according to our performance, but I know that there's some in this room that I've dealt with on many events. It seems every time there's a nonprofit event, someone wants to eat, and so I'm often called. And I cannot say yes as often as I would like, but our type of business is in an ideal sector to respond very visibly to the needs of the nonprofit community.
I would say that by definition, a socially responsible company is one that is generous to the communities and countries where it trades. And I would encourage you to think about how to maximize the resources of businesses for the benefit of any particular organization or community. The model that I've been talking about lately in appearances such as this is one that's been structured between Federal Express and the American Red Cross. Federal Express stores equipment and supplies in all of its regional warehouses so that if there is a disaster anywhere in the United States before midnight tonight, the Red Cross will be able to function and alleviate suffering by 12 noon tomorrow, thanks to Federal Express offering up something quite unique to its organization, this logistical coverage of the country. Secondly, what else does Federal Express do well? They locate people for other people. And so if there is a catastrophe, Federal Express will employ its systems of tracking people down to reunite family members. Third, they're providing quality training to all of the employees of the Red Cross. Fourth, they are encouraging their employees to volunteer in local communities in support of the Red Cross. And fifth, by the way, they're also making a very significant cash contribution to the Red Cross to pay for some public service announcements. My belief is that if you ask the Red Cross what they would first give up if they had to remove one element from that package, it would be the cash contribution that Federal Express has made. So I think all companies have a responsibility to support their communities, and I think it's up to the communities to help companies be inventive about the most effective ways to do it. The outcome here is to alleviate problems, not to necessarily just measure how much money someone's giving or who's giving more than someone else.
Debbie or Stan?
I guess I'd like to second the notion that looking for creative ways to give is an important thrust. Of course, I'm talking from a food retailer, low margin business, so that's a driving concern. But some of the areas we've done that in is, for example, our First Wednesdays program, where we donate the net proceeds of all of our store sales on the first Wednesday of each month. We focus intentionally on smaller organizations like the House of Emoja, for example, because we think one of the major benefits we have to offer them is visibility. Now, obviously, that's a two-way street. It works for us in the sense that Ron was talking about at the same time. It links us on a value base with our customers. But we think that one of that we are giving them as much benefit in that way as we are with the dollars that we're distributing. In addition to that, we are willing to take a stand on some public issues, which means that the recent Parks ballot measure, we printed it on our shopping bags. That doesn't cost us anything, but is of substantial benefit to that party. Or the bottles and cans for the homeless program. Again, virtually no cost to us except initial operating costs. A creative solution that is producing some real results. Beyond that, I think we're at about. Sarah, are you here? Our administrative coordinator is here. I was going to check our percentage. I think we're someplace over about 5% of net profits at this point in time. In the process of trying to do some research to set a standard for ourselves to manage that by. I think this is an area where we have some room to grow in terms of creating a rationale and a structure around it.
I guess as the last speaker, I'd echo the same notion. I think there's a little more intense scrutiny of public companies where, stock is held by a number of mutual funds, pension funds, et cetera. But if you intend to build an enduring great company, I can't think of a single one that doesn't in somehow or some major way contribute to the communities that they operate in, whether that be community services, education, the arts, humanitarian purposes, whatever. And our goal as we grow is to participate in all those areas. Although we've started out relatively modestly, we spend about 1.5% of our operating profits on donations community involvement and other activities. But even more importantly, I think it isn't just the cash or the money. I think it's the example that's led by the management team. Each member of the Merix executive team is expected within the first year of joining us to join at least one significant nonprofit organization board and to contribute time and effort, and the company will match that with financial contributions. And I also think that as individual members of our communities, I think it's important for business leaders to put their own personal money and wealth, not just the corporate money and wealth, on the line too, to show their investment and support in all the nonprofit activities in the community as well.
These are wonderful responses, and I'd like to listen to them more through the afternoon, but we've exhausted our allotted time. I want to thank Ron and Stan and Debbie, and particularly Robert. You came the longest distance for an excellent program, one that we will all remember, I think, in our hearts as well as our minds. This meeting is adjourned.
Oh my God, that's the hottest one. I haven't gone.